Greetings, I am Master Tenzin Roshi. We live in a world that worships work. We are taught from a young age that our value is determined by our productivity, our success measured by our job title, our life defined by our career. We build magnificent careers, impressive resumes, and comfortable lives. But in the process of building these beautiful golden cages, many of us have forgotten that we are not meant to be caged birds. We are meant to be free. Today, I will reveal the 5 hidden traps of modern work, the invisible bars of the gilded cage that keep you anxious, exhausted, and far from the peace that is your birthright. Which of these words best describes how you feel about your work right now? Energized, drained, inspired, or trapped? Share your word in the comments below. It is a powerful act to simply name your experience. Before we continue, I want to welcome you to this sanctuary of wisdom. This is a community for those who are ready to find a new way of working, a way that is aligned with peace, purpose, and presence. We are on a mission to create a global sangha of individuals who are transforming their relationship with work. If you feel a calling to join us, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and to turn on notifications. Your journey into a more peaceful and purposeful working life begins now. To understand the traps of modern work, we must first understand the story of the silkworm. The silkworm is a remarkable creature. It spins a magnificent cocoon around itself, a thread of pure silk that is both beautiful and strong. It works tirelessly, spinning and spinning, creating a safe and secure home for its transformation. But here is the tragedy. The silkworm becomes so identified with its creation that it forgets that the purpose of the cocoon is not to be a permanent home, but a temporary vessel. It becomes a prisoner of its own magnificent work. And in the end, it is often boiled alive in the very cocoon it created, its silk unraveled, to be used by others. This is the story of modern work. We are the silkworms. We spin magnificent cocoons of careers, titles, and accomplishments. We work tirelessly, believing that we are creating security and safety. But we become so identified with our cocoons that we forget our true purpose. We forget that the purpose of work is not to be a prison, but a platform for our own growth and transformation. And many of us are being slowly boiled alive by the stress, the pressure, and the soullessness of the very cocoons we have so proudly created. This brings us to the one great truth that is the foundation of this teaching. The purpose of your work is not just to make a living, it is to live a life. When you forget this, when your work becomes the center of your universe instead of a part of your universe, you have become a prisoner in your own cocoon. The 5 traps I will reveal today are the 5 ways we forget this truth. They are the 5 ways we become silkworms, spinning ourselves into a beautiful and deadly prison. And here we must make a very clear differentiation. This teaching is not against hard work. It is not against ambition. It is not against creating a successful and abundant life. The Buddhist path is not a path of mediocrity or laziness. It is a path of wisdom. And the wisdom lies in understanding the proper place of work in your life. It is the difference between being the master of your work and being the slave of your work. It is the difference between using your work as a vehicle for your own awakening and allowing your work to become the tomb of your spirit. The traps are not in the work itself. The traps are in our relationship to the work. This brings us to the first hidden trap, the cult of busyness. This is the belief that a full calendar is a sign of a full life. It is the addiction to being slammed, swamped, and buried. In the modern world, busyness has become a status symbol. It is a way of signaling our importance to ourselves and to others. If we are not busy, we feel lazy, unimportant, or guilty. And so we fill every waking moment with tasks, with meetings, with emails, with the relentless hum of productivity. We wear our exhaustion like a badge of honor. But the truth is, busyness is not a sign of importance. It is a sign of a dysregulated nervous system. It is a form of running. It is an attempt to outrun the emptiness, the anxiety, or the meaninglessness that we fear is lurking just beneath the surface of our lives. I had a student, let's call him Michael. He was a senior manager at a tech company, and he was the high priest of the cult of busyness. He worked 12-hour days. He ate lunch at his desk. His calendar was a solid wall of back-to-back meetings. When anyone asked him how he was, his standard reply was slammed, absolutely slammed, and he said it with a kind of weary pride. He believed that his busyness was a measure of his success, of his indispensability. But when he came to me, he was on the verge of collapse. He was suffering from insomnia, his relationships were strained, and he felt a profound sense of emptiness. He said, "Master, I am doing everything right. I am working harder than anyone. Why do I feel so miserable?" I asked him a simple question. "Michael, what are you running from?" He was taken aback. He said, "I'm not running from anything. I'm running towards success." I said, "Are you? Or are you running from the silence? Are you running from the feeling of being alone with yourself? What would happen if you stopped running? What would you find in the space that you are so desperately trying to fill?" He had no answer. The question terrified him, but he was desperate, so he agreed to an experiment. I asked him to schedule 1 hour of empty time into his calendar every day. No phone, no computer, no tasks. Just 1 hour to do nothing. At first, it was torture. He said it felt like the most unproductive hour of his day. He was twitchy, anxious, and bored. His mind screamed at him to check his email, to make a call, to do something. But he persisted. And slowly, in that empty space, something began to emerge. The feelings he had been running from started to surface. The loneliness, the sadness, the fear that his life had no real meaning beyond his job title. It was painful, but for the first time, he was not running. He was listening. He was being present with his own inner world. And as he learned to be with those feelings, they began to lose their power. He realized that his busyness was not a sign of his importance, but a symptom of his fear. He started to make changes. He started to delegate more. He started to say no to meetings that were not essential. He started to take a real lunch break. He was still a successful manager, but he was no longer a slave to the cult of busyness. He had learned that his value was not in his calendar, but in his presence. He had learned that a full life is not measured in tasks completed, but in moments lived. This brings us to the second hidden trap, the myth of the corporate self. This is the trap of mistaking the mask for the face. It is the process by which we slowly abandon our authentic self and adopt a persona that we believe is required to succeed at work. We become the tough negotiator, the cheerful team player, the data-driven analyst. We learn to suppress our doubts, our fears, our quirks, our true passions. We become a carefully curated version of ourselves, a corporate avatar. And the danger is that over time, we forget that we are wearing a mask. We start to believe that we are the avatar, and we lose touch with the vibrant, messy, and authentic human being that we truly are. I had a student, let's call her Jessica. She was a partner at a prestigious law firm, and she was a master of the corporate self. At work, she was known as the shark. She was aggressive, relentless, and brilliant. She never showed weakness. She never admitted to being wrong. She was a formidable opponent and a highly effective lawyer. But this persona came at a great cost. When she came home at night, she couldn't take the mask off. She would argue with her husband with the same prosecutorial zeal that she used in the courtroom. She would cross-examine her children about their homework. She was always performing, always posturing, always trying to win. She was deeply unhappy, and she didn't know why. She said, "Master, I have everything I ever wanted. Why do I feel so disconnected from my own life?" I told her the story of the no mask. In Japanese no theater, the actors wear beautiful, stylized masks to represent their characters. A skilled actor can make the mask seem incredibly alive, but the actor never forgets that they are not the mask. They know that their own face, with all its imperfections and expressions, is still there. Underneath, I said, "Jessica, you have become so identified with the mask of the shark that you have forgotten the face of Jessica. You have forgotten the woman who loves to laugh, who feels deeply, who is sometimes scared and uncertain. You are not a shark. You are a human being who is playing the role of a shark." I gave her a simple practice. I asked her to create a threshold ritual. I told her that every evening when she came home from work, before she walked through her front door, she was to pause. She was to take 3 deep breaths. And with each breath, she was to consciously and intentionally remove the mask of the shark. She was to visualize herself taking it off and hanging it on a hook outside her door. And then she was to walk into her home as Jessica. Not as the lawyer, not as the partner, just as Jessica. It felt strange at first. She said she felt naked, vulnerable, but she kept practicing. And slowly she started to remember who she was. She started to laugh more. She started to listen more. She started to be more present with her family. She was still a brilliant lawyer, but she was no longer a prisoner of her own persona. She had learned that her greatest strength was not in the mask she wore, but in the authentic face she was learning to reveal. This brings us to the third hidden trap, the poison of endless striving. This is the belief that happiness is just one more achievement away. It is the "I'll be happy when" syndrome applied to our careers. I'll be happy when I get the promotion. I'll be happy when I get the raise. I'll be happy when I get the corner office. We are like donkeys chasing a carrot that is always dangling just out of reach. We achieve one goal, and for a brief moment, we feel a sense of satisfaction. But almost immediately, the mind creates a new goal, a new carrot, and we are off and running again, convinced that this next achievement will be the one that finally brings us lasting peace. But it never does, because we are seeking happiness in a place where it can never be found in the future. I had a student, let's call him Ben. He was a young and ambitious software engineer, and he was deeply addicted to the poison of endless striving. His entire life was oriented around the next promotion. He worked nights and weekends. He sacrificed his health and his relationships. He told himself that it would all be worth it when he was made a senior engineer. And then he was. He got the promotion. He got the raise. He got the new title. And for about a week, he was ecstatic. But then a strange thing happened. The feeling faded, and a new thought arose in his mind. I need to become a principal engineer. The carrot had moved. He was back on the treadmill, chasing a new future that he believed would finally make him happy. He came to me in a state of confusion. He said, "Master, I got everything I wanted. Why am I not happy?" I told him the story of the hungry ghost. In Buddhist cosmology, a hungry ghost is a being with a huge, empty stomach and a tiny, pinhole mouth. They are constantly starving, constantly craving, but they can never get enough to be satisfied. I said, "Ben, you have the mind of a hungry ghost. You are looking for fulfillment in the external world of achievement, But that world can never fill the emptiness you feel inside. You are not hungry for a new job title. You are hungry for presence. You are hungry for the joy of this moment. I taught him the practice of finding joy in the process. I asked him to shift his focus from the outcome of his work to the process of his work. I told him to find one small thing in his day that he could do with his full attention and a sense of appreciation. It could be writing a single line of code. It could be listening to a colleague in a meeting. It could be the feeling of the sun on his face as he walked to work. I told him to stop chasing the carrot of the future and to start savoring the food of the present. It was a radical shift for him. His mind was so conditioned to be focused on the next goal. But he started to practice. He started to notice the simple satisfaction of solving a difficult problem. He started to appreciate the camaraderie of his team. He started to find moments of joy and presence in the midst of his busy day. He was still an ambitious and successful engineer, but he was no longer a hungry ghost. He had learned that happiness is not a destination to be reached, but a way of traveling. This brings us to the fourth hidden trap, the tyranny of the urgent. This is the state of being constantly reactive, of spending our days putting out fires instead of building the temple. Modern work is a relentless assault of the urgent, the endless stream of emails, the constant ping of Slack messages, the back-to-back meetings that could have been an email. We are so busy responding to the urgent demands of others that we have no time or energy left for the important work that only we can do. The important work is the deep work, the creative work, the strategic work. It is the work that requires focus and silence and uninterrupted time. It is the work that nourishes our soul and makes a real contribution to the world. But the urgent is always louder than the important. And so we spend our days as firefighters and we wonder why our temple is never built. I had a student, let's call her Maria. She was a graphic designer and she was a creative genius, but she was miserable. She spent her entire day in a state of reactive urgency. Her inbox was a constant source of anxiety. Her Slack was a never-ending stream of demands. She would start her day with the intention of working on a new creative concept, but by the time she had cleared her inbox and responded to all her messages, it was lunchtime. And the afternoon was filled with meetings. At the end of the day, she would be exhausted, and her most important work, the work that she loved, the work that she was brilliant at, remained untouched. She felt like a hamster on a wheel, running faster and faster, but getting nowhere. I taught her the practice of protecting the sacred hours. I told her that her creative energy was her most precious resource and that she had to protect it like a dragon guarding its treasure. I asked her to identify the time of day when she was most creative and focused. For her, it was the first 2 hours of the morning. I told her that these 2 hours were her sacred hours, and during these 2 hours, she was to be unavailable, she was to turn off her email, she was to turn off her Slack, she was to decline any meeting invitations. She was to put a sign on her door that said, "The temple is under construction, do not disturb." And during these 2 hours, she was to do nothing but her most important, most creative work. It was a terrifying proposition for her. She said, "But what if someone needs me? What if there's an emergency?" I said, "The real emergency is that your soul is starving. The real emergency is that your greatest gifts are going unexpressed. You must learn to distinguish between the urgent and the important. And you must have the courage to choose the important." She decided to try it. The first few days were filled with anxiety. She was constantly tempted to check her email, but she resisted. And in that protected space, something magical happened. She started to create again. She entered a state of flow. She lost track of time. She produced some of the best work of her career. And she felt a sense of joy and fulfillment that she had not felt in years. And she discovered that the world did not fall apart because she was unavailable for 2 hours. The urgent emails were still there when she finished, but she could now respond to them from a place of fullness, not from a place of depletion. She had learned to stop being a firefighter and to start being a temple builder. This brings us to the fifth and final hidden trap, the illusion of connection. This is the paradox of our hyper-connected world. We have more ways to connect with each other than ever before: email, social media, video conferencing, and yet many of us feel more isolated and alone than ever before. We are in a state of constant, shallow connection, and we are starving for real, deep connection. We have mistaken bandwidth for bonding. We have mistaken information for intimacy. And we have forgotten how to be truly present with ourselves and with each other. I had a student, let's call him Tom. He was a remote worker, and he was a perfect example of the illusion of connection. He was online from the moment he woke up to the moment he went to sleep. He was in constant communication with his team, who were spread out across the globe. He was always available, always responsive, always on. But he was profoundly lonely. He had hundreds of digital colleagues, but no real friends. He would sit in his home office, staring at a screen all day, while his wife and children were in the next room. He was physically present with his family, but his mind was 1,000 miles away, lost in the digital ether. He was connected to everyone and to no one. I taught him the practice of the digital sunset. I told him that just as the sun sets every evening, he needed to create a sunset for his digital world. I asked him to choose a time every evening. For him, it was 6 p.m. when his workday would officially end. And at that time, he was to perform a ritual. He was to close his laptop. He was to turn off his phone. And he was to say out loud, "The workday is over. I am now home." And then he was to walk out of his office and be fully present with his family, no checking email on his phone, no thinking about work, just being there. I also encouraged him to schedule a weekly connection call with a colleague where they were not allowed to talk about work. They could talk about their lives, their hobbies, their struggles, a real human conversation. It was a difficult transition. He felt a constant pull to check his devices. He felt guilty for not being available, but he stuck with it. And he started to notice the magic of real presence. He started to have real conversations with his wife. He started to really play with his children. He started to form genuine friendships with his colleagues. He was still a productive and valuable employee, but he was no longer a digital ghost. He had learned that true connection is not measured in megabytes per second, but in moments of shared presence. He had learned to unplug from the matrix and to plug into his own life. So, I invite you to reflect on your own working life. Which of these 5 traps have you fallen into? The cult of busyness? The myth of the corporate self? The poison of endless striving? The tyranny of the urgent? The illusion of connection? Be honest with yourself and be compassionate. These traps are not a sign of your personal failure. They are the water we are all swimming in. They are the invisible bars of the gilded cage. In the comments below, I want you to name the trap that you are most ready to escape. You can simply write, "I am escaping the cult of busyness," or "I am escaping the illusion of connection." Naming the trap is the first step to disarming it. Remember the silkworm. The purpose of your work is not to spin a beautiful prison. The purpose of your work is to create a vessel for your own transformation. It is to live a life of purpose, of presence, and of peace. And you do not have to boil alive in your own cocoon. You can choose to break free. You can choose to remember that you are not the silkworm, you are the butterfly, and you were born to fly. Peace and clarity.